Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organizations. Each and every episode, we sit down with experts from various fields from around the world, just like you're grabbing a coffee with them, to dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So go grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you win over skeptical and resistant teams without losing your sanity? Every leader goes through seasons of our leadership when we're trying to figure out how to win over the skeptics among us, how we're trying to bring together our teams. Well, today on the Speak with People podcast, we're diving into this incredible topic, this incredible conversation. Thank you for joining us on the Speak with People podcast. This is your go-to resource to learn how to communicate with impact, deepen your connection, expand your influence. Well, today we're tackling a challenge that every leader faces at some point, leading skeptics, leading and communicating to resistant teams. So managing people is tough enough, but when you're faced with the cynicism, it can feel like an uphill battle. But here's the good news. Winning over the skeptics isn't about pushing harder. It's about connecting deeper. I am beyond excited to have our guest join us today. Hywel Berry is calling in and being a part of the podcast. He's a corporate trainer, a keynote speaker. He's worked with global brands. I mean, brands that you would recognize right away, like Nike, Deloitte. He has dove into this topic a ton, and I cannot wait to ask him questions about this. So thank you, Hal, for so much for being on the podcast, and welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Jason.
And like we were just talking about offline, you are trying to stay warm in the beautiful northeast of the country.
Yeah, my office is also above my garage, so it's freezing cold in the winter and boiling hot in the summer. So yeah, it's never perfect.
Right? Those of us who work at home, you're going to feel really, really sorry for me, but we're in Tampa, and we as well are going through a bit of a cold spell. So people in Tampa are losing their minds when we're waking up and it's in the low 30s. So
yeah, I was going to say, yeah, this is Tampa cold, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not equatable to us up north, but still.
Well, before we hop into the conversation, I'd love for you to tell our listeners more about you, your story, who you are, what you do, what's gotten you to this place.
Yeah. So I was in very early life, everybody. I was an actor. I thought that was what I was going to be. You can still find me on IMDb. My star meter is very, very low. But I was in a few TV and film projects when I was a teenager, which funded me very well. But getting into my 20s, I realized, now you're competing against everybody. And I just didn't really have a place with casting agents. So then I spent a few years wanting to be and trying to be a screenwriter. And I sold some scripts. I made bits of money. But I didn't, looking back now, Jason, I didn't work as hard as I needed to. That's one of those careers that is not just going to come to you. You've got to fight every single day to get it. And as driven as I was back then, it wasn't enough. So I had to get a real job like most people. And what was the skills I had? So what was easy? I had improvisation, speaking to people, speaking to large groups. Did a lot of stage stuff with thousands of people in the audience. So sales would be easy for me, I figured. And with great love to everybody, it was in one bit of sales, which is the standing up and speaking bit. There were other bits of sales that I had to learn, namely being very British. I didn't like asking people for their money. I was very good at pitching a product, but then saying, now, can you give me cash, please? But I learned and I became genuinely good, I believe, and got moved into leadership and loved being a leader. Really enjoyed it, really enjoyed running teams, really enjoyed worrying about other people. Ended up with quite a large team of about 20 people. I was with an international newspaper, the Financial Times, if you read it, Jason. It was wonderful, great brand to sell. It was them that brought me over to the US, and I'd always wanted to live and work here. I came to New York when I was 14, just completely fell in love with Manhattan. Thought it was the greatest place in the world. And when I got here, Jason, it was the greatest place in the world. Like instantly, I loved it and felt comfortable. And so, unfortunately, when the world crashed in 2009 and they let me go, I didn't want to go back home. So, my wife and I got married quite quickly, Jason. I love her very, very much, and we're still together 15 years. But I had to get a green card. I had to start working.
Yep.
So 6 months out of work, and it became clear actually that I wasn't going to get another sales job. That there just weren't many, and dealing with somebody who had been out of work or sponsoring them was just too much. So it really was out of necessity that I got into training. I can do that. I thought I can get up and speak in crowds. It's much more freelance as a job. But the first session I ever did, I just instantly thought, I should have been doing this my whole life. This combines everything I love and I'm good at. Speaking and acting and performing, but writing and thinking on the fly, but also inspiring people. And I realized that I'd missed also and I say this, with all due respect to us all, but adoration of people. I'd love people giving me a round of applause at the end, or seeing in their face that I've excited them and they're ready to go and try something. So instantly, like, this is it. This is my world. This is what I'm going to do. So for the last 15 years, that's what I've done, either full-time with companies or in more recent years, freelancing with other groups, and then setting up my own entity, Alicorn Learning, where we work with companies around the world on all sorts of personal development. But it all really stems from this idea of how do we use our own presentation skills, our own, anima to make a conversation what we want, to bring people along with us. And as you mentioned, one of the big things I've hit on is this idea of not only allowing cynicism, but using cynicism. So as I say, with a training room, there's no trick to training people who want to be there. You've got them, no problem. The trick is winning over people who hate training and have had bad experiences in the past. That's the skill. If I get them to like it, then I've done something really special. But looking back, I realized I'd done that as a leader. We do it as a parent. How do you use cynicism to your best advantage?
Wow. Boy, that is such an amazing topic. As a dad of 5 kids, there's a little bit of cynicism at times.
Do you think? They don't always love what dad says. I can't believe it, Jason.
Yep. It's funny at times the way that my brain works. Like I've literally have to filter out the cynicism, the sarcastic comments, I'm like, okay, I can't say that. I can't say that. I can't say that. So this is gonna be great. Which ones can I say? I love that. So jumping into this, what are some of the biggest mistakes that leaders make when we're dealing with, skeptical or, resistant teams when it comes that way?
So I'm gonna, because I know that many of your audience are speakers or trainers as well. So actually, I really think it crosses over both groups. I think there's a couple of core mistakes. Number one, it's thinking of cynical or challenging people as a problem. So I saw this a lot with trainers that I was training and developing. Was, if you said to them, what if somebody's in the room and they're asking annoying, challenging questions? They'd go, well, I'll speak to them offline and ask them to, keep it to themselves. It's like, no. That's what makes a training room great. Somebody saying, hang on, I disagree with this. Great. Then let's see why you disagree and what the reality is. So not only are they not problem children, but the same thing with a team. If you've got somebody willing to disagree with you as a leader, that is staggeringly valuable. Because most of us are terrified for our jobs. Most of us sit there in our minds going, what a ludicrous idea. And we nod along and we leave the room going, I'll do it if you want me to, but I disagree with this completely. And I was absolutely that person, Jason. I believed that if I disagreed, they would not like me and my job was at risk. But more, it was I don't want people to dislike me. So I'll just say that I like it. But if somebody's willing to say, how I disagree and here's why, and I don't like it, great. So a first top tip I give people, Jason, is if you're a leader or anyone in charge, if anyone ever disagrees with you, the first word out of your mouth should be, thank you very much for disagreeing with me.
Hmm.
Now, after that, you can say whatever you want. Then you can say, I still disagree, and I'm sorry I'm in charge and you're not. But the first thing should be, that's valuable to me. And if you're in a room and you hear a leader thank someone for disagreeing with them, that makes you go, I can disagree too. I can say what I think. That's the culture we want to create
Wow.
and use that disagreement.
Wow. I mean, that kind of goes in the face of one of the things we talk about speak with people is, when we either lead with people through trust, through collaboration, or we lead at them through fear and control, and not allowing people to, be cynical or ask those kind of questions. We lead at them. We create this culture of fear. We don't allow them to disagree with us. I mean,
No.
right then and there, I know for so many leaders listening, that could be a powerful change to their leadership, and be freeing at
And
times.
absolutely. And listen, I'm a big fan of saying this, Jason, but everyone's got to find their own version of this. There's no exact right
Mm,
way of doing this. And I'm a realist, everybody. Some people are just irritating. Some people just disagree on principle. I'm not claiming those people don't exist as well, but I still think there's a better way of dealing with it. But so, to your first question, like what's the mistakes? One is that
yep.
we don't allow cynicism and disagreement as much as we should. But the second one is that we don't come at it with a healthy dose of cynicism as well. So I'm willing to admit why I didn't like training in my days as a leader back in the UK was these blindly optimistic trainers. This material's amazing. You're going to have a great day. Your life will be transformed. Like, you're just setting yourself up for me to hate every moment of this. But when a good trainer came in and said, look, there's some nice ideas in here, they might help you. They might not work for you, though. Or you might honestly have a better way of doing it, but I'll give you what I think is useful. I can't disagree with that. So a big thing we teach our trainers over the years, and I teach my facilitators now, is what we call be your own cynic.
Mm,
What's the most cynical thing you think somebody's going to say? Not only be ready for it, but say it first. So for like a very experienced room, or for leaders, if you're taking over a team of very experienced people, be the first one to say, you're all more experienced than me. I'm
mm.
not coming in here to tell you how to do your jobs. You know how to do your jobs much better than I can. Some of you are probably even wondering why I got the job and you didn't. I understand that. That makes perfect sense. I'm going to try and justify why I'm here. Or in a training room, not everything here is going to be gold for you. Because now, even if they do still disagree, what they're thinking is, oh, well, yeah, he just said what I was thinking. I can't really say it now and prove a point. You've said it first. So it dissipates all that power of the cynic sitting there thinking, I'm better than you.
Wow. Wow. That's just gold. Just backing up for a second, just because you're in a lot of rooms as you are training, are there
Yeah.
any, are there any key moments, things to replicate that you found that makes those trainings more successful than not? Because you're right, most trainers come in, and maybe the little rose-colored glasses, could be the greatest day of your life,
Yeah.
Tony Robbins-esque. We just don't make them walk on coals, like maybe the old school Tony Robbins did. But are there some common, I'm at a loss for the words, but characteristics that just, hey,
Yeah.
successful training, uh, you know, uses these.
Yeah. No, I think there are. So a couple of that have been tried and tested through the 3,000 sessions that I've delivered, but
Mm.
many thousands that trainers on my teams have delivered. So number one, if you're a speaker or a trainer, folks, and you don't do this, if you can, obviously large rooms, we can't do this, but a small enough room, you should go and meet each person individually
Mm.
and shake their hand and say hello, or in a modern world, whatever people feel comfortable doing, but get their name, have even just a couple of seconds of hello, how was your journey in? And for those of us who are quite high energy, and I am, Jason, as you can tell by my voice, and I'm good on a stage in front of thousands of people, but this is a moment actually to just bring yourself down a little bit, because I know I can be a little too much for people who are having a bad day, not very high energy. If
Yes.
Hywel immediately starts with, hey, 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 here we go, then your brain will go, that's exactly what I thought training was going to be. And that guy's irritating and annoying, and I don't like this. But if in the hello moment, it's, hi, Jason, how are you? I'm good. I'm Jason. I'm Hywel. Very nice to meet you. Then I've set this standard of like, he's not like this all the time. He's a normal guy, but then he's running a room. So I can see why his energy goes up a bit as he's running the room. So that moment at start is also to gauge where people are at. You know, do they jump out of their seat and give you a big hello and a big smile? Or do they just politely shake your hand and have no more conversation? Like, you can gauge where is people's mindset. It gives you a much better view of the room. So even if I come into somebody else's training session, you know, like they're running a day thing, and I just sort of come in for my hour, I still go around and meet people individually if I can. It connects you in a totally different way. They feel much more positive towards you. So number one, that. Number two, I would never use the phrase, we're going to have so much fun, or anything like it. And it annoys me to the ends of the earth when the person introducing me says, Hywel's here and I've seen him before, you're all going to have so much fun. Because again, it's like, I do want people to have fun. And I stand by, Jason, no one comes to training wanting to be bored. Like, that's not your thought process.
Yes.
But what fun is to you is very different. So again, the you know, stereotypical idea, playing games, being idiotic, doing stupid things, like, that's not fun for a lot of people. So when you start saying the word fun, I just think it gives a problematic impression, let's say. So, and then number three, it's being your own cynic, as I say. But number four, when somebody challenges you, just like I said to leaders, do not play the game of looking like this is a problem. Immediately go with that person. Thank them for joining in. Brilliant question. Let's see who else has got this question as well, but, you know, wasn't brave enough to say it. So does this relate to other people? Wonderful, wonderful. Now bring them in and have fun with them, you know, and if they keep challenging you, you stay on the happy side. You're not annoying me. This is useful to me. I'm in charge and I can move on whenever I want. But it's giving the impression that not only is it okay, but I know deep down some of you are testing me. You're testing to see if I will argue back or if I will go with you. And I'm doing both. I'm having a good argument, but I'm glad that you're joining in with me.
Wow. Wow. Boy, that's just amazing. I love that. Talk to us. I mean, sometimes as leaders, we're busy. We have deadlines. We have the pressure. We're trying to hit our numbers. It's tough to have empathy with some of our cynical teams. It's tough to have empathy with some of our resistant teams. Like, how do you muster up? How important is empathy? How do you muster up the empathy needed sometimes to break through some of that cynicism?
So I've got two key phrases I use for leaders, Jason. One of them is empathetic cynicism. So exactly as you say, it is using your empathetic side. So even if I believe in this wholeheartedly, why might somebody else be upset by this or have a problem with it? Let me understand it from their side. The other one I challenge leaders especially is realistic optimism. So it is your job as a leader to challenge the people above you. So in the room with your leaders, you should be the one saying, I disagree with this and I disagree with that. If you're not being a bit of the cynic with your leaders, you're not giving them everything they need. But the day you go to your team is the day you now have to put on your realistic optimism face. And you mentioned your children. I've got two children who are 12 and 11. And there's very like parenting. You have the conversation with your spouse so that when you have it with your children, you present a united front and a more thoughtful moment of this. So I lost my mother very sadly this year. And obviously my wife and I had dealt with it and how we're going to tell the children about this so that when you go in, you know, I'm not in floods of tears and just blurt it out. Like, I've thought about how I'm going to say this. But I'm not also saying, isn't it a wonderful thing that your grandma's died? Like, that's not true.
Right.
So blindly optimistic, like your life will be even better, kids. Like, that's ludicrous. But in the same vein, saying, oh my God, you'll never see grandma again. That's it. That part of your life is gone. That's just devastating. So what's realistic optimism? As a parent, as a leader, it's saying, whatever's happened, I see the reality of it. I understand how hard this is for you, or why this might be troublesome or upsetting on a personal front, but I have gone looking for positives here. I have looked for opportunities of where we can
Wow.
go. And I want to bring you along with me. I'm not telling you you have to see the same thing, but I've started that for us. So even the most cynical person in the room can go, Howell's not blind to my reality, but I see that he started to look positive. Even if I disagree with those positives, he's giving me somewhere to work towards, as it were. And again, by being cynical a little bit, you're not saying to everybody, don't come to me with your problems. You're saying, you come and speak to me about where you're at and what you're feeling. You can see that I see challenges too. So we can have an open chat about that. But it's giving teams, children, or in a training room, everything they need to go, I can keep following this person.
Wow. Wow. I don't mean to wow too many times, but I mean, it's just the team, the managers that could help, because sometimes we do bring this, I think, toxic optimism. I love the TV show Ted Lasso.
Right.
I thought it was incredible. Ted was amazing. Even though he's beat down 17 times,
Yeah.
he's still, I mean, like almost an unrealistic, positivity. And, sometimes we bring that toxic positivity and everyone's like, well, there he goes again. There she goes again, pretending everything's going to be okay. No, we can actually have a conversation about this and how it's going to, change. Boy, that's powerful. What, in that same vein, how vulnerable does the leader need to be? I mean,
Mm.
this gets, uncomfortable for some leaders because they're like, ooh,
Yeah.
like how much do I got to share? How transparent, do I need to be? What do you think that balance is?
Well, look, first of all, I would say don't ever try and do something that isn't natural to you.
Mm,
So, what I'm saying here is you finding your own version of that. I am quite a happily intimate person. So, if you've ever read the Trusted Advisor, Jason, it's a very
mm.
interesting book. Well, they argue the three core pieces of trust are credibility, reliability, and intimacy. So, we all bring some sort of credibility to the room. Reliability is that I can trust my leader to do what he says he's going to do. But the intimacy piece is an interesting one. Most people are very willing to say that's not their norm, especially at work. We are different at home and work. I am quite happy to share myself. I'm just bad at reliability. I always forget to do things, but working around our own negatives, whatever they may be. So if you're a more private person, you're definitely more reserved in work, that's fine. Do this within your own parameters. But that being said, whatever is within your own parameters, I think you should feel ready to share with the people below you. And up to and including sharing what you don't like about this change, or in a merger, what scares you about that merger. Again, if we just project nothing but positivity and optimism, it makes it very difficult for anyone to
Yep.
say to us, here's what I'm worried about, because they think they're going to get the response of, well, suck it up. I think this is amazing. And if
Right.
you've ever, looked at change curves, Jason, what we also know is we're all going through an emotional journey through change. But as a leader, by definition, you knew about it before your team. So you're further along through that change. So again, when they all get scared and negative, part of us thinks, what's up with you? This makes sense to me. It's like, yeah, you've had 2 weeks to think about this. They've just heard it. But being able to say, look, guys, I heard about this 2 weeks ago and it terrified me. And here's why. And here's what I'm worried about happening. And I don't know that these things are going to happen, but they're on my brain, just like I'm sure they are yours. That level of truth and intimacy, I think, is incredibly rewarding to the people receiving the message, because they're able to then go, yeah, that is what I'm thinking. We're on the same page. I can tell my truth to Jason. He's speaking it to me. I will do the same.
Wow. Wow. I love that. What advice would you give? What, nuggets of wisdom, the team member who feels like they have no power, no authority. They're
Yeah.
not in charge. They're not leading anything, but they've kind of, they got to deal with, their team members' deep cynicism. They got to be on the receiving end of Can you believe what they said at the, they got to deal with all of that kind of stuff. Any advice,
Yeah.
wisdom you'd share on that end?
Yeah, so a team member relationship is a different one. Obviously, you're not in charge of them. You don't get to tell them to shut up. And we want a good relationship with our colleagues. So I have worked with challengingly cynical people at every layer. So when I was
Mm,
very junior, they were alongside me and above me. When I was more senior, they were alongside me, below me, and above me. Like they've been everywhere. And I just want to say this out loud, Jason, just for your audience, but just because I'm now speaking about it and have developed all these ideas, do not think for 1 second, folks, that I did or do always deal with it wonderfully well. Like there is
right.
no perfect way of doing this at all. In some cases, I worked out a good way of dealing with that person. And in some cases, I never did. I could never work out exactly where they were coming from. But yeah, as a colleague, I think the greatest advice I ever got was from a colleague of mine who we walked out of a meeting and I said, "That's a ridiculous idea. I'm not doing that." And they said, "Well, why didn't you say anything in there?" And I said, they're not going to change it now. Forget it. You know what I mean? Like, I'll just get on and do it. And they said, "Well, they're not going to change it. Obviously, you didn't say anything. Had you said something, maybe they would change it." And it was a real eye-opening thing of, well, true enough. I mean, if I'm not going to pipe up and say anything at any point, then no.
Right.
So, but I'm still worried about, being in trouble, getting fired or whatever it was. And so that really sat with me for a while. And then about 4 or 5 months later, we were sitting in a meeting once with my boss. And I, as an actor, Jason, I was very good at nodding along and pretending that I agreed with things when I didn't. And she eventually said, "Hywel, it looks like you don't agree with this." And there was this long pause. And then I was like, "No, not really." She said, "Well, why don't you just say so then? What is it you disagree with?" And I said the things, and she went, "Yeah, that's fair enough. This will change and that we won't." But it was like, "Oh, you can say this stuff. You can." So with colleagues, you can say to them, "Look, to be honest with you, I kind of disagree, or I think this is better than you do. So I'll just have my opinion." But sometimes it's encouraging them to let out that cynicism in a better forum.
Yep.
Complaining to me, but to nobody else, is not going to get you what you want at all. I can't change it. But let me help you bring that opinion to somebody else in a manner that hopefully they'll listen to it.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's so practical just for the everyday. I hear from leaders all the time, nothing I can do about it. I'm so tired. So that gives us some immediate fuel to be able to, do that. Walk us through, what are some of the signs that a leader's approach to skepticism is starting to work? When can we see, like, okay, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah. So if we think about as we're going through change, and I'm just going to throw one in thing, Jason, just from that last question, which is, by the way, everybody, I think it's a great idea to have somebody at work that you can just whinge to. I think
Mm,
that's very useful and powerful. That none of this negates a good whinge about things I hate. So that one work colleague who you could just whinge to and you both just let it out, I still
yep.
think that's very powerful. It's not
Yes.
that we always have to go running to our boss and tell them what they're doing wrong. So, but have that.
Love that.
But for leaders, as we're going through change, so if you think about it, if you have the buy-in to the change down the side, and then the kind of energy that this person puts into it along the bottom. So top right there for a lovely 2x2 model, but top right is a change champion. They love this idea. They're running around telling everybody it's fantastic. Now, if you've got one of those people on your team, fantastic. If it seems genuine, they really understand this, they're really on board, lovely to have. But we're not going to have a team of those people if we're even lucky enough to have one. Top left, therefore, if you imagine it, very high buy-in, but their energy is low. They're just getting on with what you're asking them to do. We're going to call them cooperators. And if you've got a whole team of cooperators, you are gold as a leader. Here's what we're doing. They all just get on and do it. Little bit of discussion, but no major arguments. Life would be wonderful. Bottom left, therefore, you've got cynics. So low buy-in, but low energy. Now, I'm willing to admit that's exactly what I was. I
Mm,
didn't like things all the time. I didn't plan on doing it, but I also didn't plan on telling anybody why I thought it was a bad idea. But then bottom right, therefore, you've got blunt saboteurs. Hate this idea, but they're running around telling everybody it's awful. Now, in a weird way, The easier of those two on the bottom is actually the saboteur. At least I know about it. At least you're telling everyone it's a terrible idea. That I can deal with. I can bring you into conversations, hopefully win you over. And an easy tactic, Jason, of course, is to give people some control. You know, you don't like it. How would you do it? How can I give you some semblance of control over this? But yeah, the more tricky one is the cynics. You don't necessarily know about it. They are doing it quietly in the background, poisoning an idea without anybody telling you about it. So a major thing is, just because somebody's smiling, don't entirely believe it. You've got to find a forum and a manner that you think they will pipe up and tell the truth, even if that is a completely anonymous, like, Survey Monkey link. Something like, you've got to get a real feel for your group. What is the general truth that people are saying when I'm not in the room? But I also think you should challenge more, as I finally was, is saying to somebody, you're not doing it, you're just saying you're okay with it. So now's the time to say it out loud. Please tell me, what is it you don't like? And that's why I go back to the beginning of saying thank you when somebody disagrees. It's creating that culture where people will say it to you without a terrible fear that you're going to throw it back at them somehow.
Wow. Wow. I love that. I love that. I wanted to ask you, I know we're changing topics a little bit here, but as someone who has, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen. We have a lot of speakers that listen. As someone who has built a business, you've worked with some, just ridiculous brands and companies. How? How did you get to that place? How did you, was there a pattern that you followed? I was just on a call right before this podcast with someone who's trying to break into a new industry. And so, for you, you've done this 15 plus years, you've spoke to thousands of people. How did you break through some of that and get into some of those industries, be known, be able to walk in? Because it's tough. Sometimes people think, well, I could go be a trainer, I could go be a speaker. Yeah, it's a little more difficult than you imagine, to get people to say, yeah, you could come and speak to my people. Didn't know any advice you could give to our listeners.
Yeah, no, totally. Look, I tell you what is very difficult is I'm now a speaker or trainer and calling up companies cold and saying, can I come along and speak to you? So with no background, with no videos that you can show, with no word of mouth from anybody, like, that is incredibly difficult. So I took a route that is not unique by any stretch, but I would heartily recommend it to people looking to this. So I worked for a few years with a training company. And what they did, all of their speakers were freelance, essentially. So they all had their own businesses. So they were one-to-one coaches. They were trainers with their own businesses. Many were university professors who wanted, extra work on times off. So we deliberately went looking for people with a wide variety of backgrounds so that they would be interesting in front of the room. But what it gives you is the chance that the selling is done by the main training company. You are then brought in as the expert facilitator, but you don't have to do all of that work of finding and managing the client and even building the material in most cases. There are others where it is your material and they're more like a broker between you, as it were. But there are lots of these companies around. And if you get on their books, what it can give you is some experience in the room. Interestingly, experience of very different groups. So with the company I was with, I was literally doing like board level bank in the morning and a group of nurses in the afternoon. Like, it was completely different all the time. And again, that was phenomenally useful to give me experience of very different types. So, I have my own business, Jason, but I still freelance with other companies because it's nice sometimes to just get work that is turn up on the day and be brilliant. You don't have to deal with clients.
Yes.
I don't have to, mess around with the months of development at all. Just let me get on stage and do my thing. Keynotes, interestingly, are some of the best paid work with the least work beforehand. It's one event. It's a one-off thing. They know they're going to have to pay a little bit. So you've got the very big name keynoters who can go up to $500,000 a year. Obviously, I'm nowhere near that range. But, even in that bottom range, it's well paid, but again, you've got to have some experience elsewhere. So if you get it through another company, you get some experience on stage, you get time in front of different crowds, so that when you're then truly selling yourself from scratch, a good trick is if you do one where it's recorded, ask them for a copy of the recording, because you can then, get their permission that you can use it, but to show a little show reel of yourself.
Yep.
You get 3 or 4 quick show reels from you on stage. That's really all clients might need to see. Yes, that's the type of speaker we're looking for.
Wow. And I know I could send you requests to do, probably 2, 3, 4 more episodes just on this topic, because it seems like a never ending process for many. But this was absolutely brilliant. I can't thank you enough for walking us through this. I mean, such a unique topic, so incredibly practical, because this is what we deal with, every day as leaders. But before I let you go, we have a tradition. We ask all of our podcast guests some of their favorites, because we're putting together an online communication library, so any leader can go to it and get new ideas. And so, as a speaker, is there a speaker that when you watch them speak, he or she, they just blow you away? Their content, their delivery, they're just that phenomenal. You can't wait to recommend them to someone else.
So I was lucky enough to do an event once for a large group at Starbucks. It was my largest group of like 8,000 people. It was my largest by far. And the next largest is like 1,000 people. But that day was amazing. It made me feel like a true rock star that day. So I was on, John Legend was on, the cast of Hamilton was on, and Brene Brown was on. And I'll tell you now, Jason, the greatest thing that's ever happened to me is leaving that arena that day, and somebody came running over and said, "Hywel, you were the best thing today," which up against the cast of Hamilton and John Legend was pretty good. So I will take that quite happily. But also on stage was Brene Brown.
Yes.
And God knows how much she makes. She's in a superstar league. But it was genuinely brilliant. It's wonderful to watch somebody that you really can go, I know exactly why they're there. This wasn't accidental off the success of one book or something. Like, she has developed this all herself. And she's really just talking about storytelling. I mean, how many people could have said they do that and do it well, but to become the name in it was genuinely impressive and wonderful. And so, when you watch a true master, you just go, yep, that's great. That's what I want to emulate.
Boy, I love that. If you're a podcast listener, is there a podcast, either guilty pleasure or leadership development kind of, that you just can't wait for the new episode? You forward it on to people.
I'm going to give you a guilty pleasure one here because I was just listening to it this morning. But it's called The Big Flop, everybody. It is of things that have flopped in the world, such as marketing efforts or people who got arrested for stupid stuff. Yeah, it's hosted by a wonderful comedian called Misha Brown, and they have 2 comedians on each week, and it's like, it is educational. I mean, it totally is. So it's like big events. Do you remember the massive, I kind of knew about this from the UK, but the massive Pepsi marketing thing where they said you could get a Harrier jump jet for 700,000 tokens, and somebody did get them and wanted their Harrier jump jet and was told no. So it's like, there's real things where you go like, oh, I kind of knew about that, and you genuinely learn it. But it's also just genuinely funny people being funny on a well-known topic. So.
Oh, I love it. And then lastly, I mean, probably the toughest, is there a book that you just, every leader, you have to read this book?
So I've mentioned it a couple of times, and honestly, it's the one I reference more than any other. And so no slight against them. I'm not saying it's the world's most fascinating book, but within it are 3 or 4 of the most fascinating things that as a leader or a person or a trainer or anything like it will be good for you. So it's The Trusted Advisor by Meister Green and Galford. And as I say, I reference this almost constantly, because whether it's salespeople, leaders, speakers, trainers, or anything, if we're not deliberately building trust with the people right in front of us, we're simply missing out on a gargantuan piece. It will happen naturally, but to think it just is always going to happen naturally is not enough. You can do it more deliberately, and they really break it down perfectly.
I love it. I love it. Where can we send our listeners to go find out more about you, connect with you online? Where's the best spot?
Absolutely. So my speaker page is at hywelberry.com. I'm the only Hywel Berry in the world, folks. So I'm nice and easy to find. If you just type me into Google, most of my things will come up. But my company is Alicorn Learning, so alicornlearning.com. And that's where we do the broader stuff for groups of all types and training other trainers as well. So, but yeah, type my name in. My IMDb page will also come up. So click on that to make me feel more famous than I am. Will be fantastic.
Oh, I absolutely love it. I can't thank you enough. I mean, what a huge charge you've given us today. A great call to action to be able to walk through some of this cynicism, resistant teams. Thank you for opening up your vault and so freely sharing. And just so appreciate you being on the podcast.
That's fantastic, Jason. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Speak with People podcast. It means the world to us when you share this episode. Thanks for liking, subscribing, or following the podcast. That really does help the podcast get into more ears and into more leaders listening. Also, don't forget, we have 2 exciting resources for you. The first is go to Facebook and join the Speakers Group. This is a community designed for leaders who want to grow their communication skills. Also, go to speakwithpeople.com/skills library to access the Communication Skills Library. It is an online resource chock filled with resources that will inspire you and transform you and grow your communication skills. Thanks again for being a part of the listening community. We cannot wait for the next episode.